Have you noticed that music can affect your mind, your mood, those sorts of things? Maybe could it affect your taste? Psychology expert Dr. Jo Lukens is with me. Good morning.
Good morning, Susan.
Can music affect our perception of taste?
It can indeed.
Okay, tell me more.
Yeah, it's a fascinating area because, and I guess those who work in hospitality won't be surprised when I say that food is far more than simply the food experience, that there's a lot that goes into the experience of dining out or eating out, but also our experiences at home as well. So it's an interesting area for us to be considering today.
Yes, and because some of that, even there is some of those restaurants as well, that they're those sensory restaurants where the lights are out, there's no music, it's all very quiet, so it's all focusing on the flavour. So there must be some level of...
There's been quite a lot of science that's looked into this and quite a lot of research, both from how food is presented visually, but also, like we're talking about today as well, the sounds that we hear and how that influences our food experience.
So can things like the volume, tempo really change that perception of the flavours?
It can. So interestingly, some of the research that looks at restaurants that play louder, faster music can intensify the perception. So we're talking about the perception here. This is how we think it tastes as opposed to how it actually tastes. So there's always a difference between perception and reality, isn't there? And in this case, it makes a big difference. We find things sweeter, we find things saltier when we're in those kind of environments. And so our sensory processing is affected. The other thing that it affects is our pace of eating as well. So if the music is faster, we tend to eat quicker. And we know that there's lots of merits in eating slower. So it's an interesting one for us to consider.
So what role, let's talk about plating. What role does that play in the taste perception?
It makes a big difference, and the visuals, much of our taste is influenced by the perceptions of what we see. So when we see a beautifully plated food, that it creates emotion. The reason it makes a difference is it creates an emotional experience for us. And if ever you watch any of those food shows, the competition ones, it's often about the plating and the presentation.
Eat with your eyes.
Yes, that's right. All of those sorts of things. So we do know that what happens is when we look at food, we interpret it, that influences our emotions, and then that influences how we feel about that experience. So the plating experience actually is important.
It's also interesting. So maybe if you don't have a great chef, you could just play great music, though.
Yeah, maybe that would help. It would certainly set the scene. It would certainly set the ambience.
Yes, exactly. Are you hearing from psychology expert Dr. Jo Lukens? We're talking about how music can maybe influence how we interpret flavours. So is there, specific genres of music that enhance certain types of food?
Yes, they can. And again, it's going to be about personal preference because it is that emotional connection that we have with it. So if you enjoy classical music, that might enhance the experience of fine dining. That might be what you might be more likely to expect and experience, and you step into the mood of the restaurant when you go into it, or if you're playing that at home, whereas casual meals might have more contemporary music, pop music, rock music, those sorts of things. So I know one of the local coffee shops I go to in the morning, it's often that old school music, which probably,
nostalgia.
Yeah, that's right. And that nostalgia element helps you to relax, so therefore you enjoy the food more.
Oh, yes, very interesting. So how can or do restaurants use that music and plating in combination to improve our customer experience?
Yeah, I think that some restaurants will spend quite a bit of time considering this, and so they might curate playlists, and it might be that earlier in the evening you might play a particular type of music through to later, and then I guess depending on the type of cuisine too, there might be some expectations that you might have around the kind of music that would be playing.
So do cultural aspects come into this as well?
Well, they do. If you think about some of the restaurants that you might go to, if you went out for an Indian meal, or if you went out for a Japanese meal, or if you went to a pub, those sorts of things, you can probably already anticipate what that music is going to be like. So again, it sets the scenes of those expectations that we have, and then it can deepen your connection with the food as well.
I'm not going to be able to eat a meal the same ever again, Dr. Jo.
It's interesting then if you think about it, do you translate that when you go home? So I'm thinking about it now. I made a fish curry last night and I don't think we had any music playing. So maybe the family might have enjoyed it more, although they were just grateful that I had cooked and they hadn't. So maybe that didn't make such a difference last night.
Yes, we just have to sometimes practice mindfulness when we've had meals in front of us. Psychology expert Dr. Jo Lukens, thank you very much for that.
Thanks, Susan.